Okay, welcome to episode 3 of From the Resort podcast. This is a new podcast where we're finding out about all the people's stories in the Queenstown Lakes District area. A few days ago we had Mayor Jim Bolt on, and that episode is now up. Today we've got Martin Cheifetz from the mountain scene. Martin's been working for the mountain scene for the last couple of years as the advertising manager.
Correct.
So thanks you very much for coming along on the podcast, and we'll look forward to hearing a bit about your story today, Martin. So I guess where we like to start, Martin, is where did you grow up? Where were you born? Where did you live early life, and what was that like?
Yeah, I'm from New York, and I'm from the New York area in the United States, and then I lived there until I was, I guess, about 30, and then I moved to London. I was there for 17 years, and in a story similar to your wife's that she was just telling me, I went to London for a year and ended up staying 17 years, got married, had 3 kids, bought a house, and then loved my life in London until it stopped working, and the economic circumstances changed.
Sort of to go back a bit further, so when you started off in New York, tell us about those early years. What did you sort of get up to as a kid, and what did you get into? That
would ruin my professional career now. I suppose I was just an average kid. I was an only child, and grew up in suburban New York and then suburban Connecticut, and there's just nothing remarkable about my childhood, really. I suppose I was just an average kid, really. I wasn't...
What sort of, sports were you into? Were you into any sports growing up?
I was not particularly good at any sport. I've always enjoyed being active, always enjoyed being outside, always being active, but was not particularly good at team sports. My eye-hand coordination isn't particularly good. I can't see a damn thing, so it's difficult for me with ball sports. But the things that I've always enjoyed doing throughout my entire life are things that I'm still doing now, like cycling, skiing, and those just sort of outdoor activities. So hiking, being with my dog,
Okay, so going back, what can you remember what your first job was when you're sort of in sort of high school?
That's funny that you asked that question, because my first job is now the job that I'm doing right now. I used to be on the advertising side of my high school newspaper. I worked at my high school radio station. I started off as a DJ at my high school radio station. And then I ended up being the program director and then the finance director of my high school radio station. So I've been selling advertising space since I was, 16 years old. And wow. So now I'm 54, and I've been doing it for a long time. And I started out at my high school newspaper, or my local community newspaper, and now I'm back at my local community newspaper, and had some bigger jobs in between. But I'm kind of very much back where I started from, and enjoying it very much.
It's great that you can enjoy something so much that that you're still you're sort of doing a lot of in that role as a 16-year-old. Obviously different part of the world, some different stuff going on, but ultimately at the end of the day, running your own radio show, that's always an interesting story in itself, and it does take a lot of skills to be able to manage the whole process and get things going, doesn't it?
It does, and I suppose I was really rather shy as a teenager, because you asked me a question about high school sports. I wasn't the high school jock that gives you great confidence, and I had moved midway through high school, so I didn't have a huge network of friends. So between not being the popular jock, and then not having a long history in a town, the radio was a good way just for me to sort of make a name for myself, and it helped me overcome my shyness, actually.
Yeah, there's lots of different ways you can sort of get out of... you grow up a certain way, you might be introverted to a degree, but there are certain ways you can sort of go about your life in order to get more confidence and to get, I guess the networking going, getting out there and thriving in your jobs and being able to do it really well. So that's quite interesting, and I'm sure those sort of skills you've developed, over time as well.
Yeah, it is an interesting question, and believe it or not, I'm actually rather introverted. You wouldn't.
Yeah.
I mean, I come across as extroverted just simply because that's what I do professionally. But on the weekends or in my spare time, I do spend all my time by myself.
Yeah.
So cycling, out with my dog, on my kayak, fishing. I mean, I don't necessarily seek a lot of human interaction on a personal level because I get so much on a professional level. And and I suppose I'm more confident in a business situation than I am in a social situation. I'm not necessarily that socially confident. Business-wise, I'm confident.
Interesting. So I guess going back in time, what sort of prompted the move at the time to go from Connecticut, New York, across to the UK for, I think you said 16 or 17 years you were there?
Yeah, that's right. I was working for a business-to-business publisher in the mid to late 1990s, and my boss at that business-to-business publisher moved over to Playboy magazine, of all places, and she became the president of Playboy Publishing and gave me a terrific opportunity to come work for her at Playboy magazine. And Playboy is what brought me from New York to London. So I became Playboy magazine's first international employee since the 1970s, and I was responsible for their international advertising, and that's what brought me to London. And then then she left Playboy, and my new boss at Playboy moved over to a health and fitness publishing company, and took me with him. And when he moved, and I stayed there, I ran that international media business for 14 years, and that was really good. I had a whole group of magazines. There were 14 magazines at one point, 14 magazines plus their websites and social media, and we had a mail order business, and it was good. I had about 65 or 70 employees in 7 countries. And yeah, it was quite a thriving thing until it wasn't.
Yeah. So you probably get asked this question when people hear a little bit about your story of sort of touching into doing some publishing with Playboy. Did you ever get to meet Hugh Hefner?
I did. I met Hugh Hefner at my job interview. I started in Playboy in 1997. And yeah, I met him at the Playboy at the after party for the Playboy Jazz Festival, which was an amazing event at the Hollywood Bowl. Yeah, and so it was at the Playboy Mansion. Met Hef, mingled with the celebs, and that was my one experience at the Playboy Mansion with Hugh Hefner. But I worked a lot with his daughter. So his daughter Christy. His daughter was running Playboy up until. I don't know. I mean, I sort of lost touch with her, but certainly mid 2000s. But I reported to one level below Christy, but I traveled a lot with her extensively because she was very interested in international growth, and that was where I was focusing on. So I traveled a lot with Christy and her husband. Yeah,
so that's quite interesting, that whole story and being involved in that. And obviously, it's a good story to tell people. Something that sort of happened in your life where you got to meet the great Hugh Hefner. So it's those the publishing and the magazines and that sort of stuff that you're getting involved in. You said there were how many did you say? 14 to 15? Or
I had 14 at one point. Yeah.
Well, they're mainly fitness, health magazines.
Yeah, correct. All health and fitness. Yeah. So we were the titles were Muscle and Fitness.
Yep.
And then Flex, which is a bodybuilding title. Yeah. So you had to be a hardcore fitness enthusiast or a bodybuilding enthusiast to read those publications.
Now, I remember a guy who was on one of those covers of magazines. I'm sure it was one of those ones that you mentioned, and he was Connecticut. I believe he's Connecticut. He's a wrestler, Triple H.
Yeah, Triple H. Yeah.
You've heard of him,
of course.
Was he on one of your magazines? Is that right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was on both Muscle and Fitness and Flex a number of times. Yeah, we used to do a lot with the WWE guys, at first it was WWF, the World Wrestling Federation, and then they got into a big spat with the World Wildlife Foundation.
That's why they had to change it.
Then they changed it to WWE. Yeah. So World Wrestling Entertainment. But yeah, we had Triple H and a whole bunch of these guys. Yeah. Hulk Hogan,
guys like The Rock, maybe.
The Rock all the time, yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever get to meet any of these guys at all?
I never met those guys. No.
Yeah, but obviously they're in the magazines and stuff. So fitness magazines. How have you sort of seen that change over your time? I guess mainly in the UK. What have you sort of noticed with how that? I mean, obviously there's still, it's still out there. If you go to a newsagent today, they've still got the fitness magazines are still there, even though you see some of these magazines, stop publishing because they get less popular and because of things change over time, and people are going onto the internet a lot more. So, what have you sort of seen when you were there? Was there a sort of trend to that, or what?
Yeah, for the fitness magazines, in every country, it was different because so I was headquartered in the UK, but I was responsible for the UK, France, Germany, Italy, the Netherlands, Australia, Sweden at one point, Poland at one point, and all of those places have different media markets, and the way that your publications were distributed was different in each one of those markets. But the UK was our biggest market, and what killed us ultimately was regulations more than structural change in the media business, and by that I mean so we had exactly one advertising category, and that was sports nutrition supplements, and there was a European Union health directive that came in, and it was a torpedo to our advertisers. You had to verify every claim that you made, which is fair enough, but it killed us, and it wiped us out overnight. And what happened wiped us out from an advertising perspective. And so we went from publishing 300-page magazines, which for £5 you buy it for £5, you get a 300-page magazine. It was a good value for the consumer.
It's very thick.
And we went from 300 pages to 100 pages in 6 months. And all of a sudden, as the consumer, you walk up to the newsstand and you're used to getting a big thick magazine for £5. All of a sudden, you're getting a third of what you used to get. It doesn't feel like the value proposition that it used to be, and so you end up in this downward spiral. Print advertising is a funny thing like that, where you have to be successful in print advertising in order to be more successful. Because if you're big and you're thick, people look at it and say, "Oh, well, this is great," and everybody's in there, and then everybody else needs to be in there. And if you're thin, people look at it and like, well, this is pretty poor, and I'm not going to read it, or I'm not going to advertise on it because it doesn't look like there's anything happening. So what killed us was not necessarily structural change in media, but it was the regulation that torpedoed our advertising business. And had that regulation not changed, we would have had, we certainly would have had a decline as things go digitally, but not the rapid sink that we had. I mean, we were torpedoed.
Yeah, okay. I guess the way the world goes sometimes, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't you just got to look at the ways going forward. It's you got to look at different things. There's always something that's going to affect an industry, and not every industry is going to get affected as badly as some. And we've seen, there's lots of different examples where things become sort of less relevant, I guess, to what's going on there. People still publish books, people still publish magazines, less of them, yes. People just have a different way. I mean, feeling a book in their hand is still something that a lot of people grew up with. So there's always going to be that. I guess they want to be able to sit down and read the book.
Yeah, that's right, and they're also not distracted when they're reading the book or the magazine. The book or the magazine is not beeping at them right? And it's not diverting your attention. You're singularly focused on it, which is number one, very nice for the advertisers that are in there, but it's also very nice for the reader too, to be, I can read this newspaper, I can read this book, I can read this magazine, and it's not asking me to do anything. I don't have to click on this, I don't have to look at the messages, notifications, whatever. So it's a nice experience.
So growing up, I mean, obviously you got into the industry, but were you sort of a person that would go and buy magazines regularly, and what type of magazines would you buy?
That's an excellent question. I loved magazines. I always loved magazines, and I always felt like that was a great career for me, because the interest that I had, whether it was cycling or skiing, for example, or cooking, you'd have these back in the day in the 1980s. You had these beautiful, lavishly produced magazines, and it was a whole visual experience. You really felt like this was something special. You whether you had the magazines delivered to your home or you'd go to the newsstand, and they were beautifully produced and beautifully photographed. I mean, I got into photography, I got into writing. I was just so interested in the craft of producing something of that visual quality, and they were passion pursuits, right? I mean, I wasn't that interested in news magazines, oddly enough. I work at, despite the fact that I had a newspaper background and I work at a newspaper now, but the special interest publications were fabulous. If you're passionate about something, that's all you want to talk about, whether it's fly fishing or mountain biking or skiing or cooking or, food and wine, hiking, whatever. It's really interesting to be surrounded by a bunch of other people who are also interested in reading about it, writing about it, taking pictures, and so on and so forth. And so they were beautifully produced products. And there were collector's items. If you walked into anybody's house that was into fly fishing, you'd have these great fly fishing magazines or ski magazines, or the magazines that I worked for, Muscle and Fitness and Flex, for bodybuilders. That was the Bible, right? And people would collect it. Playboy magazine was a collector's item also, right? And so, I mean, I always loved magazines.
And what about Mad magazine? Can you remember that?
Of course I do. And that, unfortunately, that just folded. Within the last 6, since the pandemic, that was the end of it. I mean, they'd been struggling for a long time. But I grew up with Mad magazine in my summer camps away. We all used to love Mad magazine.
Yeah, they were quite funny. The old Spy versus Spy, and and
Alfred E. Newman.
I miss that. Being a kid, being able to.
And the famous illustrator whose name escapes me right now, he died in the last year also. He died, and then the pandemic hit, and that was kind of the last two remaining, the two straws that broke the camel's back, I think. Yeah,
definitely. So I guess the UK, if you want to reflect on your time in the UK, I guess, what did you sort of, obviously you must have enjoyed living there, if you lived there for that amount of time. Whereabouts in the UK did you sort of reside, and what did you think overall? I mean, looking back in time now.
I lived in London. I lived in Kensington in London, so West London, and I loved it there. It was great, and I commuted to the offices for our magazine company were up in a place called Harrogate in North Yorkshire, and it was interesting because I used to commute there by train once every other week. And the first time I went there, I got off the train in York. And it never really dawned on me, being from New York, that there was a place that was Old York. Because if you're from New York, New York is the center of the universe, right? In case you didn't get that memo, New York is the center of the universe. But you get off the train in York, and it's this Viking city, right? With walls that were built from those Roman walls, Viking walls. It's this great walled city, and it just didn't dawn on me that that was original York, old York, instead of New York. But Harrogate is in North Yorkshire, and it's a beautiful garden city. It's a very sleepy, gorgeous, quintessentially English town, and so I got to know North Yorkshire reasonably well and London reasonably well. But in between those points, I really didn't get around the UK that much. I was much more interested actually in spending time in Italy and other European countries than I was other parts of the UK. Yeah. Because I found it to be really interesting that you can get on a plane and in 45 minutes to an hour and a half, you'd be in any number of other cultures, speaking other languages, eating different foods, and figured, well, I'd rather do that than go to someplace else in England or Wales or Scotland.
Yeah, that's the beauty about living in that part of the world is that there's a lot of different nations, a lot of different languages, as you said. You got the contrast of Scandinavia with going across to France and Germany and Italy and Spain and Greece. It's all within a couple of hours, and it's and then you got the train systems right across Europe as well.
It's great.
It's probably putting it on the spot here, but if you had a favourite place in all of Europe, what would it be?
Easy. Two places. London, where I lived, I thought it was an amazing city, and the Dolomites in Italy, which is where we spent most of our summers and our winters. So magnificently beautiful part of the world, magnificent, and with incredible people, and so yeah, I think that's a pretty easy answer actually.
Okay.
And there's other, there's plenty of other terrific places, but that's where we chose to spend our time.
So, when in your life was the first time that you ever visited New Zealand?
My first time here was 1999 with my wife is from Auckland.
Okay,
and
your wife is from Auckland.
Yeah, so we met in London, and so we met in 1998, I guess, and we were down here in 1999. Yeah, end of 1999 for the turn of the century.
Okay, and did you get down to the South Island at that point in time, or was that a bit later on?
I took a big tickie tour of New Zealand. We were here for 2 or 3 weeks.
Yep.
And yeah, I took a reasonable tour. I stopped everywhere, including Queenstown.
Yep.
But we were, we did the quintessentially tourist thing. We were 2 days everywhere. So I don't, I don't remember what I did in Queenstown in 1999. Yeah.
It'd be a lot different now back then than it is now anyway.
Yeah, I probably was on the Shotover jet, and I know I went down Skipper's Canyon for, we took a bike ride through Skipper's, and I don't remember. I don't even remember where I stayed. I was asking my wife that a little while ago, like, where did we stay when we came down here? And she doesn't remember either. But no, I don't know.
Yeah. So I guess when did you make the decision to sort of think about moving to this part of the world from London? So you were in sort of the UK up until about 4 years ago?
6 years ago. Yeah, so we got here midway through 2014, and it became pretty obvious to us it was in January 2014 that this was when the legislation changed in the sports nutrition industry. And when our advertising dried up, my compensation dried up. And the thing with living in London is that it's a very expensive city. Yeah. I had 2 kids in private school. I needed a lot of cash, and for a while I was making a lot of cash. And then when the money stopped rolling in because the advertising stopped, there's only so many things you can cut back before you just eroding the very reason that you're living in a big city. And so we decided to pull the plug, and I was away. I was traveling, and I get this email from my wife, and the subject was "Our New Life," and it showed, and there were 3 links on it, and it showed. It was actually a link to a photo in Lake Wanaka, actually, but it was a picture of something in Wanaka, a picture of a beautiful home in Wanaka, and. So here's our new home, with the link to the house. Here's the new area with a link to Lake Wanaka tourism or something. And I forget what the third link was off the top of my head. But I took a look at it, and I'm sitting there on a cold, dark, rainy night in northern England. I'm like, man, we're moving. And I just responded back. I'm like, I'm in. And we just decided, really on the spur of a moment, to completely change our lives and move down here. And we started hatching a plan of how to do it in January. And I was down in Melbourne on business in March, and I came to Queenstown for 4 or 5 days to take a look around, to see if I really thought that I could live here. And I fell in love with it again and decided that yeah, I mean, we can do this. And I had to look around at various places to live and a look around at the schools, because my kids were obviously younger at the time. And I was just like, yeah, man, we can, hit the total life reset button and let's do it. And came back and we decided, for real, I guess it was March or April 2014. So let's go. We told the kids and we hatched a plan, and they moved over here in July, and I came in October 2014.
Wow. So yeah, that's still a pretty quick process when you think about that, but it's obviously when you know sometimes, and you just go about trying to do it as quick as possible. So then, I guess your first work job that you sort of had before you started working with the press and mountain scene, fitness, media, and nutrition advisors.
Yeah, well, I mean, that was a consulting business that didn't really work too well. So my original plan, my original plan when I moved here was that I was going to continue doing my magazine job in the UK, but from New Zealand, and commute, every other month, and go back to the UK for 3 weeks, and that didn't go over too well with my boss in New York. So that was the end of that plan. The next part of the plan was that we were going to live off the rental income from our fabulous apartment in London, and that was fine until. So I was going to supplement that with some consulting work in the sports nutrition industry, and my consulting income was, shall we say, erratic at best. The rental income was fine. And then a little thing called Brexit came along, which was a few world crises ago that not many people are talking about Brexit anymore. But my tenant left and we couldn't find another tenant. And that was the end of my passive income that was supporting me, and then I actually needed to get a real job again, which was sort of horrifying. And Queenstown is not the easiest place to find a high-paying job.
No, that's right. Yeah,
it's there is still plenty of low-paying work, but as the sole breadwinner for a family of 5, a low-paying job doesn't really solve the problem, does it?
No.
So I started working in the UK again. For a company called Fitness Genes, and which I was an early investor in and the original chairman of the board of, and I was working on this genetics business, and that was a really fascinating, still is a fascinating business. A little difficult to manage working for a UK company and needing to be on UK conference calls in the middle of the night.
Yep.
But that went. I did that as a day-to-day thing for about 3 years until it just became too much, and then decided to really work locally here.
Yep.
And the job at the mountain scene came up, and it's just if you're going to live here, I mean, I really think I have the best job in town because I get to know everybody. You had the mayor on. I mean, I think the only person that knows more people than me is the mayor, right? I mean, I'm out all day, every day, on the phone, in person with every type of business and business owner, and you get to know everybody. And if you're going to live in a small town, it's great to be at the heart of it.
Yeah, definitely. I can see that this is I haven't been here very long, but I can see it's a small place and people will know each other. But obviously, being in your particular role and dealing with all the different businesses that are in the area and surrounding areas that advertise. Advertising the mountain scene, maybe the Otago as well. You obviously know quite a few people, so it's a good way. I get, and you'd obviously be at a point now where you've been here 6 years, and you would certainly know what's going on in pretty much everything. The mountain scene comes out on a Thursday. I saw an article written today in your publication by the mayor, Jim Bolt. There was a nice, good article sort of backing up some of his sort of recent sentiment as far as what he thinks sort of going on, and he's got a very positive spin on where things are at the moment in Queenstown compared to what the fearmonger is, the fear of what was sort of coming out of the pandemic. What is your sort of, I guess, feeling on the area as a whole since you came? You obviously loved it. What have you seen change in the last 6 years? What have been the main things that you've seen?
Well, I mean, certainly that housing and traffic would have to be the two biggest things. 6 years ago, when I moved here, Jack's Point, I was living in Jack's Point, and there were, 100 houses in Jack's Point. Now there's 1,000 houses in Jack's Point. Hanley Farms, it was still a farm. There was nothing there. I don't know how many hundreds of houses are in there now. Yeah. There was the bridge was still a one-lane bridge.
I remember it was a one-lane bridge.
Yeah, that was a one-lane bridge. So just on that side of town, there's been huge developments. You cross over the one-lane bridge, and Frankton. I mean, the Remarkables Primary School didn't even have. It wasn't completely full at that point. None of that stuff in the Frankton Flats was there. Yeah. Right, it was that was also a farm, right? Mm-hmm. There was nothing there. Now there's however many tens of thousands of square meters of retail space, and then Shotover Country was also a farm. I mean, that was how many houses are in there? There's another 1,000, 2,000 houses in there. I mean, it's all new, so that whole thing is new. And I mean, there was zero traffic when I got here, to the point that I was so excited. Actually, I made the mistake of being on the Frankton Road at about 5 o'clock, and I got stuck in traffic. I was so excited. I called my wife. I'm like, I'm actually stuck in traffic, because it was such a I was so used to just sailing through. I'm from New York and London, right? Yeah, and traffic is a part of life. And it's like you just get in the car and you drive. And when my first traffic jam, I was actually excited about it, because it sort of felt like home. Yeah. And the novelty of that quickly wore off. Because of course the problem here is that you have one road, right? And if there's traffic on it, you're not going anywhere. Where at least in New York or in London, there's more than one way to get from point A to point B.
What I sort of do like about where I'm living here in Arthur's Point is there is a back road. Yeah, that goes around to the back of Frankton that way. Mm. So if I think it's going to be any smidgen, if it's going to be any problem of traffic, and I want to get to that part, I want to get to Kmart, or I want to get to any of those places. What I like about living here is 12 minutes I've got the back way. Yeah. If I go that way, it's going to be 13, 14 minutes if there's no traffic. So yeah. So but with the obviously with the tourist numbers at the moment, the traffic sort of come back down a bit, I would say. Over the last 6 months here, from all intensive purposes. They're a great place to live, but I think one thing that correct me on this, but I think just the people here make, the people that sort of make the area up. Everyone seems really friendly for the most part. Absolutely. I mean, the people here, I think, are incredible, and again with the New York and London background, where people go to New York and London. I mean, sure, they want to live there, but largely because they have to live there for their work, right? And New York is by definition aggressive and angry, and London, because the English are a little bit more polite, London is aggressive and polite, and so the pace of life in those places is so much faster than it is here. And nobody needs to live in Queenstown. People move to Queenstown for a story like mine or a story like yours. You move here because you're like, wow, this is awesome. I want to be here. And you wake up and you look out your window, no matter where your window is, and it's awesome here. It's complete, and so it's difficult to be in a bad mood. And you're surrounded by a bunch of people who want to be here, who embrace the lifestyle, and because everybody's generally happy, everybody's in a good mood, and it's a really nice place to be. And it's challenging to earn a living, but it's a fabulous lifestyle if you could figure out a way to pay for it. And the people make it all the more
the people make it incredibly special, right? Friendly, inviting, welcoming. We had my daughter, when she had her first sleepover, we were here a week. In London, it would take you like 6 months to organize a sleepover because everybody's going someplace else. In here, kids are just showing up at your house, and you'd never have that in a big city. And it's just so nice and normal, the type of normal that you wouldn't get in a big city. I don't even know if you'd get that in Auckland.
No, Auckland's got bad traffic compared to everywhere in Australia, bar Sydney. Maybe it's traffic's a lot worse than Brisbane. But Auckland, it's a lot different there than it is anywhere else in New Zealand, I think. So I guess going back to what the sort of business is sort of doing here in this part of in Queenstown Lakes area, how have you sort of, I guess, how are sort of businesses that have been advertising in the mountain scene and that sort of thing? You obviously, I've actually been reading the magazine for a couple of years, even since I moved here, and it's good that there's a lot of local businesses that support the magazine on a regular basis. They're regularly advertising. What are the secrets to be able to keep those customers so loyal and wanting to spend the dollar and making sure that they get the bang for the buck at advertising in the local, the local rag?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And so number one, I think businesses advertise every week because it works for them, right? I mean, you try to have a good relationship with all your customers. Customer service is key. And what does that mean? I mean, every Thursday I drive around and I deliver newspapers to maybe not every advertiser, but most of the advertisers, certainly the big ones, or if they've changed their ad and they want to see the new creative. I mean, I'm there. I drop off the newspapers, and say hi and have a little chat. And so customer service is a big thing. But apart from that, they're not going to spend their hard-earned money with me just because I show up and give them a newspaper. We have to make the readers. And thank you to everybody that reads the Mountain Scene and buys stuff from our advertisers. But they have to buy stuff from those advertisers, whether it's curtains or a car or a bicycle. And we reach, the newspapers tend to reach an older market, and which is I'm unapologetic about being an older market because that's where the money is. The retirement villages in town are where the money is. The homeowners in town are where the money is. And as much as the town needs, migrant workers to work in the hotels, but that's not where the money is in terms of consumer spending. It might be for a certain segment, but our advertisers are cars, real estate agents, furniture, home decorating. I mean, you need to own a home and own a car so those advertisers for us are obviously selling homes and selling cars and selling curtains and selling sofas and outdoor furniture and barbecues. Otherwise, it wouldn't be advertising. As much as they like having a chat with me, our readers are buying stuff from them.
Yeah, no, that's great. Yeah, what do you think the future holds for this? I mean, it's very hard to predict the future after what we've seen in the pandemic. What do you think the future holds for Queenstown? Do you think it's always hard, as I said, hard to predict, but I think it will continue to grow and flourish. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, I think, look, this place is too beautiful for people not to want to continue to come here. Yeah. And I think certainly the town needs to diversify from just being a one-trick pony on tourism, particularly the type of tourism that it had evolved into. And I think that, I've personally, based on my own opinion and from what I'm hearing from a lot of other locals, is that if for the subset of this town that has not gone broke, right, and there certainly have been a lot of people that have gone broke and have left because they had a tourism business and it's gone, right, or they had a restaurant and it's gone. But for the people that have survived, right, everybody seems to be pretty happy, where now there's no traffic again. You can find a place to park. It's easy to get from point A to point B. Pollution levels are down. You can get a seat at a restaurant. Locals are coming back into town now. You know, locals were not coming into town before because it was all tourism, right? We're all tourists, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that this has been quite a pleasant reset. And so I think for the subset of people who still do have money, they're actually quite enjoying the slowdown or the reset or the recalibration of who's coming to Queenstown. And so I'm certainly very optimistic for the future, and this is too nice a place for people not to want to come and spend their time. And I think that I think ultimately we are going to lose a lot of businesses here because we just don't have the mass to support. You know, without mass tourism, do we need 15 pizza places, 20 burger places, 30 Chinese restaurants? You know, whatever the numbers are, right? So it will recalibrate. But
do you think the idea of what people have been reading over the last 6 months is a technology hub, or Queenstown being a technology, like a small Silicon Valley type thing? What do you think of that as an idea that people are sort of been talking about?
I think that's a great idea. I think it's a great idea, and having worked remotely from here for 6 years, or for 4 out of the 6 years that I've been here. For a while, my fitness genes, the guy that I was mainly working with, he was in California. And from here to California is largely the same workday, right? It's largely the same workday, so it's an easy virtual commute, right? So if you're technologically connected to California, I mean, because that's where the main tech business is, that's a no-brainer. Like if you were working for a San Francisco-based company, you could easily work in Queenstown or anywhere in New Zealand.
Okay.
If you're working for a British-based technology company, there's no way you could work from Queenstown. If you're working for a New York-based technology company, it'd be very difficult to work from Queenstown.
So just a few hours makes a difference, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, but if you're working with it for California or West Coast of the U.S. business, this is easy, and I could totally see that happening. Now, of course, the challenge is you say, okay, well, can you convince your boss in San Francisco to open up an office in New Zealand, anywhere in New Zealand?
Yeah.
Right. And that's a big question because a lot of depends who the company is, right? A lot of times companies want all their employees to be on a campus. It's very much a California thing. You're on the Apple campus or the Google campus or whatever, right? Will they move the campus down here? I don't know. And you also don't necessarily have the other infrastructure or ecosystem sort of things that make those tech hubs thrive, right? It's like any industry. The car industry in Detroit in the United States or in parts of Germany, you have your factories and then you have all your parts suppliers, right? I mean, you need the whole food chain there. So I think it's a good idea and it should be worked on. And I would encourage all these California companies to come down, right? I think it's got a lot of merit.
Yeah, and I think you've got a lot of experience with it, and you speak from experience when you say what would work and what wouldn't work. So that's very, very interesting. I think we might have to finish up pretty soon. Sure. I think, but it's been quite good. I think we've been chatting over for 40 minutes, believe it or not. But I guess anything sort of final that you wanted to sort of bring up today with what you do, or different hobbies that you're into, or something that you'd like to achieve on your bucket list that you haven't, or anything to sort of finish up with here? I mean, I suppose on a personal level, I love living in Queenstown for a lot of the reasons we discussed, and I think that I'm very happy and fortunate to be
in this environment, surrounded by terrific people, and I have an excellent job that I really enjoy, and I'm just very grateful for all the local support that I've gotten here personally and professionally. It's made, when we moved here, I moved 3 kids. Took 3 kids out of school. We moved clear across the planet. It was a big move, physically, emotionally, and it was made easy because of the people here and the welcoming spirit of the town. And so I'm eternally grateful to the town for enabling my family and me to settle here and make a huge transition easy.
No, that's excellent. It's a good sort of way to finish up. Thank you very much for being one of my early guests on this podcast. I'm hoping to find out about everybody's stories, and they can share amongst them all their network and friends, and people even back home in Brisbane will listen to this and find out a bit about what's going on here on the ground in Queenstown. It's just a lovely day outside. Look at the perfect no cloud cover today, which is, I don't know if that's rare, but I've seen it a few times. So
yeah.
It's thank you very much, Martin. It's been a pleasure to have you on the podcast. We'll get this uploaded later on tonight, and all the best, and we'll catch up very soon, my friend.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very,
Thank you
very
for
much.
having me.
No problem whatsoever.